Hello, and welcome to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, a weekly conversation with women who found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm your host, Dawn Davis, and this is episode number 28. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you're a returning listener, thank you so much for coming back. If you're looking for more information about the podcast, past guests, want to catch up on previous episodes, or just want to drop me a line, it's all at the website, desertladydiaries.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram at Desert Lady Diaries. This week's guest is Jenny Kakunda. Jenny owns and operates Grateful Desert Apothecary in downtown Joshua Tree, and she shares an amazing story of the power of community that she credits with saving her life.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay. Take one. Jenny.
That's so good. I haven't started a podcast like that before. So this is Desert Lady Diaries, and before I introduce our guest today, I just want to let you know that this episode is also being captured on film as part of Joshua Tree on Film. Casey Kiernan is a photographer and filmmaker who lives here in Joshua Tree and feels lucky, as I do, to be here. He also understands this is a special place with a great feeling of community. He created Joshua Tree on Film to showcase his work as he documents some of the members of our community. Casey is collaborating on some of these profiles with another talented member of our community, guitarist and founding member of the band Third Ear Experience, Robbie Robb. On episode number 11 of the podcast, we spoke with local musician and business owner Megan Hutch. You can see her video profile on joshuatreeonfilm.com, which is where you will soon find the profile of today's podcast guest, affectionately known here in town as Jenny Q. Jenny Kakunda, local herbalist, first came to the desert in late 2000. Her apothecary, Grateful Desert, has been providing herbal, healing, aromatherapy goodness, and amazing chocolate to the high desert for over 6 years. Jenny has just finished a book about her recent near-death experience, her new life as a double amputee, and her Joshua Tree community and joy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
I'm so grateful to have you here. So as we always start, tell me about your very first encounter with this desert.
You got it. I remember very clearly. I came down from Northern California to attend Loma Linda University's Masters in Nutrition program because they're a vegetarian program. And so that's the only one I could find. I really didn't want to come to Southern California because I grew up here and I was trying to not be a
Get
part
away.
of this. That's right. So I was living up in Lake Arrowhead, just going to school for just not that long. But I came down with a friend to go rock climbing. So that was going to be the big camping trip, rock climbing trip.
Right.
And I fell asleep on the drive. And when I woke up and I was looking, we were coming up from Morongo Valley, and I was looking at everything. And I was coming from Sonoma County and Humboldt County.
Super
I'm a
green.
trees person, you know, Hawaii. And I was looking at the houses, and I was looking at the rocks and the trees, though I don't think I even registered the trees quite. I just saw great expanse. I was totally confused and awestruck, and also wondered greatly, who lives here? This place is so cuckoo. It was it felt like Mars. It felt
Yes.
like I was in outer space or underneath the ocean with the trees looking like kind of sea plants floating.
I find that especially on a full moon night, if you're out in the park or even just outside your house, it feels like you live on the moon. It's
the truth.
Right.
And up on top of Ryan Mountain. You know, I feel like, yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I remember having this thought of, I want to try it, just because the kookier experience it is, the more I just want to have a good year. I just wanted to experience it. But that was a fleeting thought. I never really thought I would live here. but that was our camping trip, and that was the first experience.
That was the first.
Yeah.
So I never thought I'd live here.
Yes.
So how did that happen?
Well, that friend became a partner who later became the father of my child. I felt once I met him, oh, this is why I moved to Southern California. It was to meet you and hightail it out of here. I was going to rescue you, you know? And so I was like, okay, so should we go to Humboldt? And he's like, oh, there's no rock climbing there. How about Hawaii? Oh, it's you know, I found us jobs there. He's like, yeah, but the rock climbing, he kept saying that about everything.
Yeah.
So finally I was like, okay, we're going to move to Joshua Tree for a year. You will climb every day, and then we will go to a place that I choose. So that was the deal. And we came out here, and after a year, we bought a house.
Wow.
And he doesn't live here, but I do. And I won't ever really leave because I've very much found my home.
Right. So when you moved here like that, besides your partner at that time, did
Yes.
you know anyone else here in the community?
Absolutely not.
Wow. So you were climbers, though, or he was at least.
He was a climber. I loved to climb, but I would never consider myself a climber. I was the hippie ma who climbed rocks.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I believe this about everybody who ends up staying. The desert knows who she wants, and she opens up for those who she wants. She calls them. And even like you were telling me before, you had this feeling. It just, I've heard that story so many times, and it was the same for me. I knew we were coming, so I made a phone call to the local health food store because that's what I knew how to do.
Right.
And they were stunned that I worked at a big health food store up in Northern California and wanted to work in a little store. And then we found a place to rent. And the funny thing is we got taken to this house, and it was covered in rat poop, but it was against the park. And Todd and I said, we'll take it. And the woman said, great. She told us at first it was $550 a month. And we said, we'll take it. She goes, great. How about $500? And I was like, uh-oh, this is very strange. Like, you're actually going less and we want it.
Right.
You know, this is not how the rest of the world works. But sure, okay. That to say, she just opened up. Everything kind of fell into place.
What I typically ask when people say they moved here not knowing anybody is then how did you work your way into the community? So I guess working at the health food store allowed you to meet a lot of people. And I guess Todd had a community of people through the climbers.
No.
Uh-oh.
Todd was very shy. Oh. I worked at Sue's health food store for a month or two. But actually how I met people was this woman, after a couple of months of working there, came to me and said, I'm looking for a place to live. And I said, wow, well, maybe you should come to my house. I think we would love for it was this random connection.
Yeah.
And she came to live with us seasonally. She was a climber during the winter, and she worked in Alaska on the fisheries during the summer. And so her and her partner came in. They were new here too, but they are very outgoing, and they were going to the bar every night. So they brought people to us all the time.
Oh, wow.
So that was
That's
one way.
convenient. Yeah.
And then I worked at Coyote Corner for a few months, like maybe 6 months, and then I got to know everybody else. And then I worked for Linda at the health food store for about 6 months. And so, you know, there you have it. And then when I started full-time on my herbals, because I was always part-time before that, I had my laboratory at my home.
Sure.
And I really, like, while it was so great to be full-time on my own, I really felt... I felt the kind of isolation of not being at least for a couple days a week with the community. Right. And B, I felt very grateful that I had those opportunities to work in town, because otherwise I would not have met as many people as I got to.
Right. And that isolation can be good, and for some people I guess it can be bad.
I think for me it's very much a balance. I'm a Leo, and I'm an Arab, and we are very community oriented as a culture. So I love my community. They are my family and my extended family, and I also need my time to be meditative, which is why I wake up at 4:30 in the morning, because otherwise my house has people in and out all day long.
So you just get that little bit that little window of time to yourself in nature. Talk to me about when you came here. Had you already been to the California School of Herbal Studies?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. And then there is this climber's salve story.
That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So, yes, I was climbing with, and that's mostly who I was hanging out with at first. Rock climbing out here, your hands, the granite is very sharp, and, you know, your hands just get torn up. And since I was the hippie herbalist, people started asking me to make something that would help their hands. So I started with a big Le Creuset pot in my oven, making huge batches of the salve and throwing out a bunch of bottles to the climbers that were living in Hidden Valley. At the time, there wasn't the 2-week minimum, so people just lived there all winter long. And I would just drop off batches and put samples all over town. And the climbers who may or may not have showered for who knows how long, they'd come and they'd be like, oh, thank God, the salve, and they'd put it on their lips and then on their toes, and the next people would do the same. But anyway, and then they would give me their feedback. And so then I would kind of change that salve in order to meet the needs of the climbing community. So really it was a community event. It was really beautiful.
And are you still making that?
I sold that company after I had my baby girl because, well, I didn't sell my company. Jenny Q's Herbals is my company, but the salve, many other lines like the belly butter for pregnant women and my tea line and my lip balm line and the body scrub, about 15 line items. I ended up selling because once I had my girl, all I wanted to do was look her in the face, and I did. And so my orders kept piling up, and I realized that I was doing a disservice to my company. So I sold it when she was 2, and I kept the line that was the closest to my heart, and which I went to school for, which was my tincture line, and which is what I opened my store with as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did that all happen with the store? Because you're working out of your house,
Yes.
fulfilling orders and things like that. And
That's
then all of a
right.
sudden you've got a storefront. How did that come about?
I did not feel the roots of Joshua Tree for many years. When I first came, like I was telling you, it felt very masculine, and I missed the herbal, the goddess component once I came. And then women started kind of slowly moving here, and I also started getting connected with women that lived here. I tried to have a moon circle, and it was really hilarious because all the women came and all their boyfriends came too. So they stayed in the house and drinking beer, and we went outside, and the women are like hula hooping and drinking beer. And I was like, okay, this is fun, but very different than what I was anticipating. And slowly women started coming, and that started feeling much more integral to me, and yet I didn't feel my roots yet. And I kept thinking I was going to scram back up to the trees. And when Todd and I split, I did. I scrammed back up to Humboldt, and I stayed in a yurt in the middle of the redwoods in Trinidad with my then 3-year-old daughter. And while it was brilliant and I needed those trees, I noticed the moon was up for about 15 minutes between the treetops at night. That was hard. And so that was really one of the most important things. And the people started calling me back. I started getting calls and long calls. And while I used to live there, this community was really strong for me, and the desert was singing to me. So when I finally moved back, I felt this sense of home deeper than I ever had. I had been here already 8 years.
Wow.
But it wasn't until then that I really felt that deep sense of home. And that's when I felt comfortable then opening my store and being a part. But before I opened my store, before I would even go for something of that nature that was such a gamble as a single mother,
Right.
I knew I needed to have something else. And so I went to nursing school as an herbalist already. So it was really interesting from that perspective, and also amazing because it made me a much better herbalist. And even before I finished nursing school, I started paying a little stipend to Linda next door at the health food store to
Right.
hold that spot when it became open.
Oh, wow.
Because it was going to become open
Yeah.
in 6 months. So I was like, okay, how much do you need to let
I'm
me
committed.
Yeah, exactly. So it sat there empty until I finished nursing school.
Wow.
And then I opened it.
And now how long has it been open?
It will be 7 years, so 6.5 years.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. What was it about the herbs and tinctures? How did you come to be so involved in that?
I, at 18, became a vegetarian for compassionate reasons for animals, not necessarily health, but it doesn't matter. Once you become vegetarian and you start researching how to eat and be healthy, you can't help but fall into the realm of balanced care for your body and prevention. And so I started studying herbs on my own, and then I got a job in a health food store years later, when maybe in my early 20s, and started taking courses. And then I took a year-long course with David Hoffman, who is, for anybody in the herb world, whoever is an herb nerd like myself loves him. And he is a brilliant man, and I was so blessed that I got to take a course with him that was a year long. And after that, I started tinkering and making my own formulas. And those formulas are still the standards of what I sell. And
That's
so,
fantastic.
yeah.
Wow. And you've got so much in that store. There's a great variety of local things
Yes.
and really interesting things.
Yes. I didn't want to just have a Jenny Q's herbal store. I wanted a resource center as well. So for when I don't know, I can refer people out. That's my joy, is finding small companies like myself, owned by small either companies I kind of have a soft spot for women-owned companies,
sure.
and bringing them in and representing them, because you know what, it's saved me, and I want that. As herbalists, we need to hold each other's hands and share the knowledge and share the success so that we can pass this down. It's important.
So, for the listeners who don't know you, but may have heard me mention this in the intro, you are a double amputee.
Indeed.
So how did that happen? Yeah. And what's it been like coming back from that?
It's been a wild ride.
No doubt.
It's been an amazing adventure, and difficult and beautiful. And I just had a friend the other day said, "You are not the same person." And I said, "I am not.
Well, that's interesting, because not only probably are you experiencing a change from just being here in the desert for the amount of time that you have now, or even that first 7 or 8 years, and then you left and then came back.
Yes.
And now
And then I left again and came back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how did that all transpire?
Well, I had a tiny surgery. It was, a couple centimeter incision that became infected. And my brand new girlfriend at the time, who moved in 2 months prior, was taking care of me and didn't really know anything about health. And so when I got really sick, 24 hours later, she called my sister, who's a doctor, but my sister wasn't available, and basically in 48 hours I was in shock, and it had gone into my bloodstream. So by the time I did get into the hospital, I was near dead and probably should have died that day. And then was taken to Desert Regional, and every day after that for probably more than a month, they told my parents that I will die tonight, that I should not be alive, actually. Because what happened was all of my organs shut down. I went into shock, and then what's called DIC, and that's when all of your blood clots, and then you start bleeding out because you have no clotting factor left. So then they gave me a bunch of medication to help my organs stay alive, which then took blood away from other extremities. So I lost my legs and my fingers and internal organs as well. But all that to say, and it was crazy, because I was in the hospital for 6 months, and then in and out of the hospital for another 6 months.
I was going to ask, how long was it from the moment you went into the hospital until you kind of came out?
Yeah.
I guess in a physical therapy capacity, learning how to walk again and how to use your hand again. And
yes. So I got out in July, I went in January, got out in July, and didn't walk until about January. I mean, I took my first steps before that. Actually, Robbie was there for that. But I don't even know what to say about all of that, because it's like that could be a 3-hour conversation.
Right.
But the things that are significant to me is, as a nurse, I studied DIC, and we studied that. It was a very small chapter. Your organs shut down and you die. I never even heard that someone could live through that before. And my parents were told 2% or 10%. And later, when they talked to those same doctors, they said, well, we wanted to give you at least a little hope, but we really were surprised you made it through the night. And when I was in the ICU, eventually taken to UCI, they have a killer burn unit and ICU, and I needed to go there because all my skin just fell away. And so they treated me like a burn victim.
I was going to say, because looking at your left arm, I hadn't noticed that earlier, but I'm just noticing it now.
Over.
Yeah.
So my scalp, I was scalped, a couple times. So they tried to use other skin from, believe it or not, cadavers, and it didn't take. So they had to do autografts, which means that they had to take it off of my body and put it elsewhere. So most of my bodies are either donor sites or grafts. But the whole village of Joshua Tree became alive in supporting me. It was really amazing. And a network of women were in charge of the spiritual medical team,
Wow.
And so Kripa and Paula, they were doing ritual and making altars in my gardens in my home. Oh. And the whole entire waiting room in the ICU was filled with either Arabs or Joshua Tree people. And Elise was calling people and sending out word, pray for her legs, pray her for... Nobody knew really what was going on, but there were these directed community prayers that were put out. I don't know how. Maybe on Facebook. And then the waiting room, the ICU secretary, she at one point told me, well, I just feel like we're a post office. We've never had so many letters come. There's all these cards coming through and crystals, and there's just a nonstop array of Joshua Tree folks coming into the ICU. And then at one point my doctor told my family that medicine is just not keeping her alive anymore. We don't know why she's alive. It is absolutely not us. And when I still, to this day, I just saw somebody in my store yesterday who just started crying, and I had only met her in the store once before, but she had heard about this, and so she told me, I prayed for you every day, and I've probably heard that 200 times.
Right.
I prayed for you every day. And the doctor then let my parents know that that's what was keeping me alive at some point. Yeah,
that's amazing.
It was really beautiful.
And you talk about that a little. You're writing a book.
I talk about that a lot because it's not just me writing a book. It was a community event. They decided to keep me alive. And so the book is a community event as well. Nice. There are many, many community members that added submissions, and I took everybody's submissions and kind of tore them up into bits of fabric and then wove them within my own writings to tell this story from many people's perspectives. And so many people talk about their prayer, their spiritual journey through this.
Well, it is, it's kind of like watching it in action.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't happening to them, but it was happening to someone in their community, and they were participating in that process. So it is. So medicine alone wasn't the answer.
That's right. It was the spiritual medicine box,
right.
The first aid kit there.
Exactly.
That's right.
So you overcame death, you survived a coma, endured amputations, and now this long journey back to health. What can you tell me and the listeners about that journey that people may not know, and what fueled it?
Well, coming back from the hospital was actually some of the very darkest times, believe it or not. I mean, there were very hard times in the hospital, obviously, that I have clips of memory of, and painful times, but it was surreal and it was a bubble. So when I was wheeled into my home for the first time,
Well, you hadn't been there for how long?
6 months.
6 months, okay.
Yeah, and I was still on a lot of pain meds, so it was really foggy, but I had been in a white ICU room for all of that time. Right. So when I was wheeled in, and all of the colors of my house, which is orange and blue and purple, it was... Well, the first thought was, wow, we kind of live a grandeur life. It was almost like embarrassing in a way. But that part was stunning because I now was faced with who I used to be. Because my business was still running around me, and I tried to help, but I couldn't. I was in pain. I was falling asleep a lot. And I couldn't, I didn't have legs yet. I couldn't reach anything to get myself even a glass of water.
Well, and then now you've been through this experience that completely changes your life. In many ways.
In many ways. Now I realized how changed it was because I was faced with my old life.
It's in the now we're in reality. Yeah.
And then what happened was I came home with about 30 meds, and I just every couple of days would tell Michigan, I don't want that one today. I'm done with that one. Until the last medication in October was the methadone. I was on many opioids. I was on Dilaudid and fentanyl and methadone. And those were all the time, plus a PCA, which they always said, push the PCA. The doctors would say, you can't let yourself be in so much pain. So when I came out on the methadone, I didn't know. Thank God. I'm a nurse. I should have known. I didn't know how hard it was going to be. And maybe it was the drug haze but I just was like, and now I'm done with this one. And I did not know the journey that I was about to take myself on. It was the darkest time for me because not only now was I seeing myself through eyes unfettered by the haze of drugs. And I was looking down at my body and saying, wait, what?
My goodness.
Yeah, it was really heavy. But then what I didn't realize was that it took me 16 days to wean down. And I thought, yay, and everybody had a party for me, and I was like, we did it. And then it was like, but then it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And what I didn't realize was the half-life of methadone is so long that it could take 30 days for the first dose to get out of your body from when you take it. And so I didn't realize that it was going to be a 3-month harrowing journey. And I was so dark, Dawn, that my friends would come over and just sit with me. And I remember not remembering who I had been and asking my friends, was I ever happy? Like, who was I? And they would promise me that I was going to feel good again, but I couldn't believe that. I didn't believe them. So I had to just say, just hold that for me because I can't even see it. I can't even close to see it. Elise and Patricia came to buy shoes for my legs, and my friend Piper came and we watched all the Harry Potters, and Kimberly, this one kind of new friend, sat me in her lap, and I just cried for, I don't know, it could have been an hour or two, but it was all seen through a haze. And it was like I couldn't actually feel myself until January. So that was the 3 months. And I finally had to move to my parents. I wasn't making it here. I was going down. And the moment that I went back to my parents and I was held in a way almost like a child, and I didn't have to worry about cooking or cleaning or laundry, and they had sidewalks, so I learned how to use my prostheses.
Right.
And went to
the little
yoga.
things.
Yeah, the big things that you don't really realize.
Yeah.
It was at that time of being there, kind of separate from, again, leaving the desert and finding my place again in my new self. New, not just my new physical self,
Right.
but my new emotional self. And it gave me such depth. I was kind of cast into, physically, I was cast into menopause. And so, there's this whole other aspect of myself. And I did, it's not like I actually naturally went into menopause, so that when you naturally go in, there's a wisdom that naturally comes with you. But for me, I was just thrown there. But the wisdom of the going down 6 days into the coma and coming back up, and right after the coma, I didn't know who I was for a very long time. I had no idea of Jenny. I had no concept. All I knew were just I was watching things and feeling things. It was really interesting. But so coming back slowly to who this person is and dropping off things that are no longer serving. For example, the nice person that's going to make everybody happy with me, or all of those things that probably naturally come with menopause. So I think that maybe that kind of gave me some tools that I wouldn't have normally gotten if I was just thrown in.
Right. So I think people generally, when they come into the presence of someone who has some kind of a physical, for lack of a better word, deformity, do you find people that don't know you, who see you, will pretend it's not there? Or will sensitively ask you, and what would you say about that? What is your preference? Would you prefer that they address that? Talk
That's
about that.
Such a great question. Thank you for asking that.
Sure.
Culturally, it's very different. White people tend to be polite. People of, like Hispanic descent, Asians, Arabs, tend to stare, which is refreshing. Because that's actually what everybody wants to do.
They're not pretending it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's why I did a video about the ACA, because I had healthcare 2 weeks before all this happened because of Obamacare. Literally 2 weeks.
Wow.
So because it happened on January 14th. Yeah. And so when I did that video, I took my legs off. People don't generally show their stumps without their prosthesis because they're weird. And so I did it without my legs because I want people to stare. I want people to have a chance to stare because we all do want to. I do. I'm a nurse. I love to check out
we're all
people's
naturally
stuff.
curious.
And we're all curious. And
Right.
often it's not about, I have had people freak out. Most kids want to ask, but a lot of kids say, "Oh my God," and cry and run, but that's their honesty.
Right.
And I enjoy that. I love it. It's often like the 9, 10, 11-year-olds that say, "Whoa, what's going on there?" And I love it. And when parents are like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I'm like, no. Come, you can ask. Do you want to check out my legs?
Because it's reality.
Because it's my
it's someone's reality. Yeah.
And most of the time, I always enjoy showing my prosthesis because it's a lonely place to be disabled like this. Sure. You feel alone. And I feel like the more that people hide these things, the more that all of us who are that way are the only people on the planet this way. And so I like to show them because that way other amputees feel like they're not alone, and that way other people that are not amputees get to stare the first time and not the second, and it just normalizes it a little bit.
Exactly.
Sometimes when I'm feeling really kind of like, if I'm in pain or very fatigued, I have less patience, but most of the time...
We all do in those situations.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's not unusual.
Yeah.
So thinking back to the very first time that you came to the desert, your first stint at making a life here, and now, how have you changed and grown as a person? What are some of the things that you've noticed?
So many, but I'll tell you a couple.
Okay.
One thing that I always tell people coming to the desert is, because I lived in very wet areas and also tropics.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful and it's right in front of you and it's moving all the time and there's noise and there's growth and there's leaves falling. And here it's quiet. And it gives you a space to see yourself. There's a grand reflection here. And it actually moves some people out that can't actually sit still enough to see themselves.
Or hear the silence.
Or hear the silence. That's right. Because what happens in the silence is
I don't know if I should say hear the silence.
Yeah,
but
absolutely. I agree. I think it is
Or
a hearing of the silence. Because what happens then is your thoughts and your mind comes in, and then you're able to look at it and hopefully match the quiet of your surroundings. And then the beauty here takes a while to come up. Then you see the pink flower. Then you see that lizard that's been sitting beside you all along and you didn't notice.
Right.
That's a very powerful place. I was thinking of goddesses in the trees, but here she has so much wisdom because of the slow pace and the quiet. So that has transformed me. There's something else too. I moved around a whole bunch in my youth, all to gorgeous, magical places that I feel so grateful that I've gotten to grow from. But being here has helped me to place the kind of roots and the kind of devotion to the people around me that's sustained. And I did not know that before here.
Right.
I would set roots and then bolt. And so they were shallow roots. And here was the first place that I really tapped in as deep as possible to be held.
Because it is an amazing, when we say that word community, it's very much a, I don't know if I can call it a verb. I guess I could. You know, it is.
Yes.
It is a feeling. It is real. People say that have been to, they come here with a little bit of music talent, kind of hesitant to get on stage and do something, but they always say, everyone here is so welcoming and encouraging and supportive. And I think visual artists, same way, herbal artists, same way.
Indeed.
It is being held.
It is being held.
Yeah.
And community as a verb, yum. Good. That's a good name for a book right there.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah. It sounds like you had a lot of, like we talked about earlier, it wasn't just the medicine that helped you, but some of the medicine, I guess we could say, in a certain way, was necessary.
Oh, yes.
In your recovery. But when you got to the point where you were just like, I'm done with this and I want to get off this, and went through that period, you had a lot of support around you. And I imagine for people who do not have that kind of support, I mean, we have such a huge issue in this country right now with people who are addicted to opioids and who may not have the support system that you had. Talk to me a little bit about how you feel having that support around you was so helpful in moving you through, I guess we could say, that drug addiction due to a medical condition. Because I think there's a lot of people out there with the idea that people are on these drugs just for kicks.
Yeah.
And in fact, you're living proof that that is not the case.
Since going through this experience, I don't think anything is an accident, and I probably chose this before coming here this time. Certainly, it made me a better herbalist, because when people come to speak with me about pain and depression and insomnia, I actually have firsthand experience with that. So I've had customers come in saying that they're trying to come off opioids since, and I'm so grateful that I've been through that, because you hear about it. Even as a nurse, I studied it, but you can't understand, or the trauma of insomnia for months at a time. I mean, not sleeping except maybe,
which can
15
lead
minutes
very
a night.
Easily to depression and
to
suicidal
psychosis.
thoughts.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say that support didn't just get me through when I came home. I wanted to say that support kept me alive when I was in the coma, when I was in the hospital. They held my parents, they held my siblings, they held my wife and my child. Then when I came home, it was there as well. But even my employees continued to work without me there. And the store did really well because everybody came to shop for me. So if I did live, I would have a place to come to and work. Right. I mean, really, it was being held the entire way through. I'm close friends with some of my nurses from that time, and they tell me that many of their patients don't have the support that I had, and it is so sad. And most don't live what I went through, but many people don't live even through many things that are not as severe because of the lack of support.
Right.
But I did want to say things like, when I came home, my wife, you can imagine, she wasn't my wife then. She was having to take care of all my wounds. Now she was my healthcare giver, and I had all these crazy,
kind of thrust into
weird wounds. Yeah, she had no medical experience, and And I saw her kind of like on the verge of a breakdown. So I contacted a very close friend of mine, Kristen Gass, and she started giving respite care for Michigan. And she would come 3 or 4 days a week and shower me. And what that means is a 3-hour event. Pulling me out of the bed with my back was completely open. It wouldn't heal. So there was no skin there. And I had tubes coming out of my kidneys, and I had tubes all over my body. And I had, this new body that we didn't understand. And she would have to carry me into this chair. She was dealing with, her own burgeoning disability as well. And then she would have to wrap me in plastic wrap before getting me into the shower. And then she'd have to clean my wounds. I mean, it would take 3 hours.
Yeah.
And then having a friend, putting on your skivvies, your underwear. I mean, the vulnerability that I felt and that my friends felt when they were there for me in this crazy time, it's really beautiful. I can't say enough about how we were held.
Well, that's love.
Yeah.
That is love.
Yeah.
And that's what we all want.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's beautiful that they were there for you and hold you through all of that.
And still.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
still. I can only dream to be as supportive to the women in my life and the people in my life as I have been held. My wife, my daughter. Every time she hears me, like if something falls, she's yelling across the house, "Are you okay, Mom?" I mean, it's been beautiful, and that's why when we started, I said, "Wow, what a beautiful experience!" It has been.
Yeah, exactly, because you've seen some things that you never would have seen.
That's right.
Had this not happened.
When you see, and you really get to see people when hardship arises, who comes
chips
forth,
are down. Yeah,
and how they come forth. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we could leave it on a better note. So thank you so much for coming today and talking with us and sharing your story. It's an amazing story, and it's not over.
And it's just beginning.
Yes.
And I just want to thank you for doing what you're doing. What a blessing to this community of
Thank
Joshua
you.
Tree.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I feel blessed to be here doing it. So thank you. Thanks so much for listening to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast. I want you to know how much I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. If there was something that enlightened or inspired you, let me know by sharing it with me and the other listeners on the Desert Lady Diaries Facebook page. Next week, I'm talking to Mary Collier from 29 Palms. Mary has been a writer since she was 13 years old, starting with her local newspaper in Audubon, Iowa. Now she writes science fiction books, one of which is titled Twisted Tales from the Desert. Usually at this point in the podcast, I'd be asking you to consider a donation to the podcast. However, if after listening to this episode you're moved by Jenny's story, I hope you'll go to the Desert Lady Diaries website, click on the blog page, which will feature Jenny's photo and synopsis, and click on the fundraiser link for her book, Held Together. Jenny's self-publishing her book, so your donation can make that happen. And in this day and age, I'm sure you'll agree, we could really use a message of community love. Thanks so much for listening.